Hello, welcome to this next Blender video. In this video we're mostly going to be doing texturing, but we are going to create a little candle flame on top of the candle as well. But we'll start off with the candle holder, candlestick, whatever you want to call it. And the first thing I'm going to do is, with that selected, I'm in object mode, going over to the materials tab here and clicking new. And we'll just call this metal, just so I know what it is. And then I'm going to split my screen, so up in the top corner, wait till the cross comes, then left click and drag that out. You could go vertically or horizontally, whichever is your choice. And then I'm going to switch this over to the shader editor. Here we go. Let's press N to get rid of that extra bit, to give me a little bit more space. And the first thing I'm going to do is just switch over to the rendered view over here, and I'm using cycles, and we'll start to set this up very basically. So something is either in metal or it isn't, so I'm going to set the metallic surface to 1, and then I'm going to take the roughness right the way down, and now you'll see I have a really shiny candlestick, which doesn't look very good. But that's okay, because we're just having a go at some settings. And I'm going to set the colour to something like a dark to mid-grey. And now we have a very black, shiny candlestick, which is no fun at all. You know, we'd rather, you know, have a little bit of detail in it, and, you know, a little bit of character. So the first thing I'm going to do is break up the surface with a bump. So we'll start off with a texture node, so Shift and A, and then under texture we'll pick the Musgrave texture. Now just a reminder, I'm using the node wrangler, so if you go to edit preferences and then under add-ons just type in node in the search and make sure you've got the node wrangler ticked. Okay. So with that done, I've got the Musgrave's texture selected. I'm going to press Shift, Control, and then click on it, and it's going to preview the texture for me. So I'm going to switch this out for a multifractal, and you'll see that becomes much softer and lighter there. And then we're going to change the scale so we get a really fine one. Now, before I do this, because I've forgotten to do it already, I need to set the object space for this. So click on the Musgrave texture and then press Ctrl T, and that will add the texture coordinates and mapping to it. And now I want to switch this over from generated to object, and you'll see we get an even finer texture. There we go. So I'm just trying to make some, you know, little bumpy, imperfect points on the surface. So we want to add that into the normal channel, but I can't add it in just as a height. I need to convert it to a bump map. So Shift A, and then under vector we'll go bump, and then click that onto the screen. I'll press height into it, and then I'll connect the normal into the normal on the principled BSDF, and then Shift, Control and click on the texture, and you'll see what we get. Now what we get is very bumpy indeed, which might be actually too bumpy. So all we need to do there, let me zoom in a little bit down here, is reduce the strength of our bump, and we can also invert it. So if I invert it, no, it makes no odds to me at all which way around that is. So if I take that down to say 0.2 and even perhaps 0.1, I'll get a much more subtle effect. Okay, so that's scattering our light quite nicely, as you know you'd hope surface imperfection does. I'm just having a look at the scale and thinking that it might be too small still, or too big rather, depending upon how you look at it. So I'm just going to slide that up till I get a really fine texture. There we go. Okay, so the next thing that will control our surface is the roughness value. So the roughness is a value between 0 and 1, and if it's at 0 it's very shiny, and if it's at 1 it's very rough. So we can demonstrate that because we've already at 0 here and it's very shiny, and if I go up to 1 it's very rough. Might as well not be a metal at all. So all I'm going to do is slide to a roundabout where it looks okay to me. So 0.3, it's still kind of metally, but perhaps a little bit less than that. I think that's good. So 0.25 there, but I still want variation. So we're going to put another texture into this. So what I'm going to do is press Shift A, and under textures I'll go to the noise texture, and before I do anything I'll plug my vector from mapping into the vector there, and then Shift Control click on that, and it will give me a preview of what's going on. Now what I want is to take the roughness down a bit and increase the distortion, and now I'm getting these nice swirly patterns, and I'm going to use those swirly patterns to vary the roughness across the surface. So if I plug this directly into roughness, I'm going to have a value roughly between not very shiny and very shiny, but in the wrong kind of direction according to what I see. So first thing I want to do is invert this. So for that I'll go Shift A, and then color and invert. I'm going to set the color to white, and I'm going to take the noise texture and plug it into the factor from the noise texture, and then Shift Control click on that, and that will give me the opposite. It's not actually making all that much difference, but I'm still happy with that. I'm still happy that that's the right thing to do. Okay, so even so, now you know I still have very white values and very dark values, and I want to even that up. The reason I set my roughness to 0.25 because I was trying to find like a maximum that I wanted it to be. So what I want to do is translate my white values down to 0.25 and my black values down to 0. So for that we need a mapping node. So Shift A, under converter, and then map range. Now I'm going to plug my color factor into there. It's not strictly the right thing to do. I should have a converter in between those two. So let me go converter RGB to black and white. There we go. Now I've converted a color into a black and white value range. So on the map range, if I click on that, and sorry, Control Shift click on that one, you'll see it's not really changed, and that's because we need to change these values first. So min to min, so my minimum value is 0 and my output minimum value is 0, if you like. And what I want to change is if my input value is 1, which is the maximum, then I want my output value to be 0.25. You see that that's taken the light values and really sort of crushed them down. And now if I plug that into the metallic, sorry, not the metallic, the roughness, and then Shift Control on the principal BDSF, we should get some nice variation across that. I'm going to take the bump out just see if we can see it a little clearer. You can see it, you know, in between, you know, the candle reflection here. You can see those swirls which are coming from that texture. I think it's quite possible that I don't want my minimum to be 0 at all because that's too shiny. So let's try 0.1. That's better. I hope you can see that. So let's pop my normal back in, and I'm going to take the strength down even more. There we go. Okay, so the last thing is the colour, really, and we could leave the colour just as a black, sort of a dark grey black, or we can use one of our textures or existing textures or a new texture to drive that colour. Now if I click on the map range, you'll see that that comes out at actually quite a reasonable range of greys and blacks, or greys to slightly darker greys. If I plug that into the base colour and then shift control click on the principled, that will add in and give us a little variation on colour. So it's not really fair to look at it extremely close up. Here I'm doing this as a kind of a static render eventually, so I just want to be about as far away as I'm going to look at it, and I think that's probably about right. You can obviously adjust it to your own, needs, or tastes and preferences. You could take it further and add more nodes, but that's good enough for me in this case, I think. Okay, so next we're going to add in a little candle flame on top of the candle, so I will talk to you in the next section. Okay, so for the flame then, what we're going to do is just nip back to, I'm going to unsplit my window. So I'm going to right click when I get my double arrow up and join areas and point at the shader area. And now I'm going to add in a new primitive. So we're going to add a mesh and we'll add a sphere. And then I'm going to use my little gizmo down here to raise this sphere up and scale it right down. So it definitely doesn't need to be a meter, so let's take that down, down, down. There we go. If I press full stop on the numpad, it will zoom me in. Saves me messing about too much. So I'm just going to pull that down a bit, and that should be okay. Okay, so I don't want my my flame to be this shape. I want it to be a kind of a flame shape. So I'm going to go to edit mode with tab, and then with vertex selection I'm going to select the very top vertex only, and then turn on we'll call it proportional editing, and then I'm going to pull that up. Now that's pulling everything up because my proportional editing is too strong. So let's take that down to 0.1. There we go, now we're talking, and I'll pull that up. Depending upon what scale you've started at, you might find that yours is a little, a little different. I'm working at a quite big scale here for some reason. I don't know how I'll manage that. Okay, so let me move that up a little bit more and perhaps increase my proportional to 0.2, and then I think we're okay. You might want to shape this a little bit more, entirely up to you. I think I want it narrower, so let me just press A twice for everything and then S to scale, and then I'm going to scale it inwards like that. That's a little bit more candle-like, I think. Let's perhaps do that as well. There we go. Okay, so now I've got this, I can start to map against it. So I'll split my screen again and switch it over to the shader editor, and of course I need to add a material, so we'll click new and call it flame. Okay, so for this one what we don't need is this principled BSDF, but we do need a couple of other shaders. Because we need two, we need the emission and we need the transparency, so that some of it's see-through. We're going to need a mix shader, so Shift A, and if you go to search and type in mix, you'll see it there, top of the list, and then we can pop that into surface. So as I said, we also need two shaders. We want emission and we want transparency. So Shift A and S and type in emission, or EMM, and we'll plug that one into the bottom, and then we'll do Shift A, S, and transparent. That's what we want. There we go, and we'll plug that into there. So these are kind of maxed out at the moment, but we'll deal with that. But what we need to do is actually merge them together, and we need a noise texture for that. So Shift A, and under texture we'll pick noise. If I can find it, there we go. And then as we've got Node Wrangler enabled, I'm going to press Control T so that it maps, and then I'm going to press Shift Control and click on the noise texture. And now we should be able to see what that noise texture is up to. So you can see we've got some darker areas and we've got some brighter areas. And if I plug that in there, oops, Shift Control on there, nothing is actually happening. So what we need to do is strengthen that noise because neither of the values is high enough to do us any good at the moment. So let me just move these out of the way. Whoops, helps if I have them all selected. Oh, come on, John. There we go. So let's take a color ramp. So Shift A, converters, color ramp, and we're going to pop that in there. There we go. Shift Control, click on the color ramp, and then I'm going to turn the black right up. There we go. And actually, in reality, that looks like it's kind of the wrong way around. I'm not sure, but we shall see. And then if I Shift Control on there we go, we can see what it's trying to do. Okay, so in the next video what we'll do is develop this a little further. I want to limit how far it goes up here because I don't want to see, you know, anything particularly definite happening at the tip of this. I want it to fade off. So we're going to add a gradient map to sort that out. So I'll talk to you then. Oops. Okay, so as I said, I want to fade the top of this candle off, or the flame off. So what we'll use for that is a gradient. So Shift A and S and gradient, so I can't quite remember where it is. Gradient texture. Now I do need a mapping and a texture coordinates for this because I need to change the way it maps. But the texture coordinates will be the same, so I'm just going to duplicate this one with Shift D and move that down, plug that into the gradient, and then plug generated into the top. There we go. Okay, so Shift Control click on there and we'll see what our gradient looks like, and you'll see it's a little black splodge just on the side there, which isn't very helpful to us. What we need to do is rotate it. So if we rotate it by say, I think it's -90 on the Y axis, and then use X and come up or down, it's whoops, up a little bit, you'll see we get this white gradient coming up, you know, coming up our candle flame. So let's try 0.9. There we go, that's not too bad. So now I can use this to combine with my noise texture and, you know, limit where my flames are going to show. So we need a mix RGB for that, so Shift A and it's color and mix RGB. I want the gradient into the bottom and the FAC into the top, and then we'll Shift Control on that node, and then if I up the factor, you'll see I get more of the gradient, but I don't want to mix. I believe I want something else. No, I know I want something else. Let's multiply. There we go. So if I take my factor right the way up with the multiply, you'll see that I get a nice black mask at the top, and I get some flames around here. And if I plug that into the color ramp, shift control click on the color ramp, I should be able to adjust that. It's not adjusting. Did I shift control click on it? No, I did not. And now I can adjust that color ramp once again to get what I want. There we go, somewhat along those lines I think. I'd perhaps like it to go a little bit further up, but you know, I'm reasonably happy with it anyway. What I'm not happy about actually is the flame itself. I want to add some distortion in, so let's do that. There we go, that's quite nice. And I might mess with the scale a bit, take it downwards. Yeah, ended up more or less where I started. I could perhaps increase the detail. It's not really helping. But yeah, we have a kind of a flame style thing going on. And if I adjust my factor here, we should get to a good point, good position. There we go. Okay, so we need to add some colour to this, so we'll have a crack at that in the next one. So I'll talk to you then. Okay, so let me switch that back. I'm a little bit unhappy about this, so I'm going to adjust it. Now, previously I had this plugging into a colour ramp, and I've completely bypassed that now. So I'm going to put this colour ramp in before the add node. So let's do that, and then plug that into there. And with a bit of luck, if I shift click on that one and update my ramp here, we should get a less less variated map, shall we say. If I turn that right up, I can have a look at my gradient. See, the gradient is quite yeah, it's quite sharp. So I want to move that black down a bit. So let me try 0.8 instead. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to shift control shift click on the multiply to have a look at that one, and that looks okay. But now I don't have enough, so I'm going to adjust my noise accordingly. So let's take the scale. Go. Perhaps the distortion. Perhaps take this down a little bit. There we go. Now we're getting a bit of coverage. Let's take the white up. Okay, so colour. Now I'm happy with that. All we need to do is on the emission is give it a colour. So I'm going to come down to a kind of an orangey red there, somewhere between the two. And then shift control click on the mix shader, and that's what it looks like. Well, that's what it looks like in the texture shaded mode. If we go over to the other mode, the rendered mode, you'll see we have quite a nice sort of candle flame effect going on. It's not perfect. Let me come out of edit mode so I can see it a bit better. Yeah, it looks quite small and sad, but yeah, I'm not unhappy with that at all. I might have got my scale out a little bit. So what should we do? Let's go back to the texture shaded mode, and I'm going to duplicate this with Shift D, and then right click to put it exactly where it was, and I'm going to use S to scale it. I'm just going to scale it up a little bit on all axes, if I can pick it right, which I don't appear to be able to. There we go. and I'll also rotate it a little bit so that it doesn't line up perfectly. There we go. And now I'll turn back on material preview, and I should have one within the other, kind of multiplying the effect, and one's a little bit bigger, so you know everything's good. Okay, so that's a little bit of a flame. What we'll do next is work on the wax, and yeah, I'll talk to you in that bit. Okay, before I continue with the wax, I did leave a note on the last bit, but just in case you missed it, I forgot to mention the strength. To get a lighting effect out of this, you have to adjust the strength. Obviously, the higher it goes, the stronger your light will be. Okay, so the wax. If I select on the candle now, and under the Materials tab, I'll click New, and we'll name that candle. There we go, and we get our principled BSDF and our output, and basically all we really need to look at here is the subsurface value and the subsurface colour. So I'm going to give it a base colour of a slightly kind of off-white, yellowy, tallowy colour, I guess. And then for the subsurface colour, I'll go for a similar, but I'm going for a more reddy colour. Maybe more orangey than that. There we go. Okay, so nothing is happening at the moment because we haven't enabled subsurface. So I'm in the material, the render display mode. So if I turn subsurface on now, you'll see, and it actually starts to have an effect. You know, the light is being absorbed into the candle. Some of it is going through, some of it is bouncing back out again, and you know it's updating it as we go. If I say turn this down to 0.5, it will lower the effect, so you will get less subsurface scattering, but maybe perhaps a more naturalistic look. I'm going to go for about 0.75, somewhere in the middle, to get where I want. And of course you can update this. We could add perhaps a noise to the bump to put a little bit of texture around the candle itself. We could even update the base color to have some flex in it perhaps. But yeah, I think we've done enough node wrangling and node messing about with for now. The only thing I will perhaps do is go back to my flame shader and mess around with my emission strength. Perhaps put it up to 100 and see how far we get. Seems there might be a kind of limit to how far that will go. Let's make it 1000. Yeah, I can see it a little bit maybe, but I think it's quite marginal. Okay, so that's it. Now we've made a candle with a flame with some nice subsurface textured wax, and yeah, there you go. I hope you found that useful, and I'll talk to you again soon.